Welcome to the American Institute of Architects Kansas City Chapter's Legends and Leaders program. This series highlights AIA architects and others that have helped shape our community, lead the AIA, and mentor a new generation of designers. Stephen Abend was president and principal in charge of design at Abend Singleton Associates. Established in 1968 with partners Crichton Singleton and Dean Graves, the firm became a nationally highly respected regional full-service architectural organization, nationally recognized for its design excellence. The firm received over 150 major awards for architecture, interior design, landscape design, and planning, including 2008 the American Institute of Architects' highest national award for excellence in architectural design. Over 4 decades, virtually every project in which Steve was lead architect has been cited for excellence, both within the profession as well as by user community organizations. Stephen was advanced in 1988 to the College of Fellows of the American Institute of Architects. He is a national peer advisor to the United States General Service Administration and served 4 years as a commissioner on the Kansas City Planning Commission. In 2008, he received the Distinguished Alumni Award from Washington University School of Architecture, and in 2010, he was appointed to the National Council of Washington University's Sam Fox School of Design. A leader in his profession, as well known by the public, Stephen has been president of the American Institute of Architects, Kansas City Chapter, and chairperson and director of numerous professional organizations and community commissions. Influential as a teacher at schools of architecture, invited by civic groups to speak on architecture and urban design, and called upon to serve as design award juries throughout the Midwest region of our country, he is an experienced architect of stature. Stephen received his Bachelor of Architecture degree from Washington University and a Master's of Architecture from the University of Pennsylvania. At Harvard, he completed advanced studies in Japanese garden design, and at the U.S. Army Engineering School, he was trained as a demolitions expert and a portable bridge builder. Let's meet Steve.
Steve, I'm so happy that you invited us here to your house to interview you for the AIA Kansas City's Legends and Leaders program. Thank you for agreeing to this, and sitting here on this beautiful veranda with Ward Parkway buzzing in the background, and it's a really lovely environment, so thank you very much.
Thank you, and Frank and James, for putting all this together, and the AIA support. So hopefully what we question and answer will be interesting enough and beneficial enough to other people, to the listeners, to make it worthwhile.
Well, Steve, we really want to focus on you and your career over the long course of time. And so in the beginning, what brought you into the field of architecture? When did you start thinking about it, and why did you become an architect?
It just happened very naturally. It seems in hindsight that every step led me closer to that reality. I believe it began with my parents, who were immigrants to this country. They came from Poland. They were born there in a rural village, wooden sidewalks. Some of the streets weren't paved. About half a mile from the Bug River, which separated Poland from Russia, and that portion of Russia is now Ukraine. When my grandfather, my father's father, passed away, unexpectedly the family became destitute quickly. The oldest brother immigrated to the United States. My father immigrated to Palestine, and with a buddy started a construction company, and he built concrete houses. So he was a contractor by nature and experience. My mother loved needlepoint. She did drawings of flowers and plants and incorporated them into these very simple, beautiful tapestries. And so I'm sure the DNA from both of those people were influential. an anecdote to that. When the oldest brother asked my dad to come to the United States, my father first had to go back to Poland and marry his sweetheart, and I'm told the next day get on the boat to come here, and he had to leave my mother there because she didn't have the papers yet. And I add all that into, because I reflect on it now about what's going on in our country. After my dad was here for a while, he had a little dime store. And my mother and I would go there on the weekends to help out, my mother to help out. And I found where the model airplanes were. Now, models back there were made out of balsa wood. I don't know how many people know about those anymore. And you have to cut out all the little pieces of the fuselage and the little balsa wood beams to tie it all together. And you quickly learn construction and connections between the critical parts of wings and fuselage. Skinning it with rice paper. All of that was, I'm sure, influential. My mother says that I was doing that before I could read, just looking at the diagrams. I spent many summers doing that and got into customizing the models. So, good experience at a young age. In elementary school, the teachers noticed me doing a repetitive kind of drawing in art classes. And they asked me to do a mural composed of the things that I was working on. So my dad, I guess, gave me a 4x5 piece of cotton. And with crayons, I did this mural, and it hung in the school for a long time till I'm told the crayons melted from the sunlight. And so I was proud of that, and I liked doing things like that. Get to high school, other things got in the way, sports and social things. But drafting class was great. I enjoyed the precision of drawings that described how to put things together. I learned how to sand a pencil to put a point on it. And I learned how to spin that pencil when I drew a line to maintain that point. That was important, I thought. Drafting teacher got me to enter the science fair with a model, with a vacation house in model form. And it received some recognition. So I was building up that kind of direction at almost every step. In high school, I got a job in an architect's office in Kansas City at Bloomgarden and Frowork. They used to be a good-sized firm. They had downsized. They were located in the historic Railway Exchange building downtown, a Richardsonian kind of building, brick and terracotta, open elevator shafts enclosed with ornamental iron. Very Sullivan-esque.
So Steve, you ended up going to a couple of universities, really prominent universities, and you enrolled in Washington University in St. Louis in their architecture school. That was your first step into actual formal education in architecture?
Yes. There was something about the way you posed the question that I wanted to say. When I entered, my father wasn't sure how he was going to pay the tuition of $900 a year. Even so, that's another contrast to those times. I thought I knew all about architecture because I could spin that pencil. And when I got there, I found classmates who were more informed than I. Many of them had come from families where the member of the family had an architecture firm. And so they knew a lot more about the profession than I did to begin with. The first year was liberal arts. The second year was basic design, taught by Leslie Laskey, who I consider my most influential teacher. He was not an architect. The dean, Passano, described him as one of the 3 best teachers of design in the world, and I believed it. He had the looks of Yul Brynner in The King and I. Scared the dickens out of me when he stared at me. He instilled the attitude that has never left, an attitude that regardless of the situation, regardless of the project, regardless of the limitations, a commitment to do good, to find a way to do good. He used what I call the Gestalt teaching method, focusing on the relationships of things. He also, he never used this term, open-ended creativity, which comes out of early education techniques, but it was a very open-ended creation guidance that he provided. I made some notes for myself to include about things that he said that I think are good for everybody. I'm going to refer to those. So imagine that Yul Brynner is staring at you and he says, don't you dare think you're finished. He had a suggestion that I found very helpful in everything subsequent. He said, break your challenge down into components. And after you do that, reconfigure it a different way. Put it back together a different way and do it again. And each time you'll come to a better understanding of the relationships between these components. Now he's talking about art and graphics, but boy, it really applies to the making of architecture. He says, it's not the start, it's not the end, it's the fight between. It's the spark of light in the dark. I think we've all experienced that in the design process, or we should. Last thing that I remember him talking about, or that I still carry with me, you can't do very well by yourself. But it is very important that you maintain your individuality. Conundrum.
Those are wonderful.
The next momentous event that I remember is visiting Eero Saarinen's office in Detroit. the class went up there on a field trip. The office was in a vacant shopping center, or he had taken over an abandoned shopping center, strip center. Didn't look like much of an office until we got inside. And every retail space, or what had been, was filled with models, big scale models of buildings that we could recognize, like the TWA terminal at Kennedy Airport, the ice rink at Yale, and more that I can't mention. And the number of architects in each one of these design studios left an impression. And those architects had a way of talking to us students that we learned from and were impressed by. And I remember some of the names: Kevin Roche and Roche Ding and Gunnar Burkerts, and people like that were all in that office. And one of the young architects explained to us their extensive use of models to test alternatives, concepts, and designs. They were testing to prove to themselves the direction to take. And of course, that helped in, they used the models to prove to their client the same thing. They weren't sure of what to do until they tried as much as they could to look at the alternatives. And that's what I came away from. One, if you surround yourself with a lot of talented people, it's very likely that the architecture is going to be very good, excellent, as it turns out in Saarinen office. And it's very important to use alternatives to ensure that you aren't just falling in love with your own work, and you need to have an open mind and look at all the directions for the benefit of your client.
Absolutely. So that made a huge impression on you.
Absolutely.
And just being among the greatness of it.
Sure. Kids up with the pros. You give credit to the school for understanding how to make for a good education.
Yes. The best in the world.
You mean Saarinen was one of the best in the world.
Right.
And now that you caused me to think a little bit about that, his work was much different than what we were being trained in school. We were in the Bauhaus and the modernist movement, and Saarinen was looking at image, that was an important thing. He had something about the role of architecture was to ennoble man. That's a new kind of story that I had never heard of before.
Yeah. Well, you had some great experiences already, and yet then you went to...
Oh, it's not done. It's not done.
There's more at the University of Washington. You need some more.
So in the fifth year, they always brought in for the first semester a visiting architect. And Aldo van Eyck from the Netherlands came to be our teacher. Well known in Europe, member of Team 10 and SIAM, influential in Europe. He was the managing editor of Forum magazine, and he came advocating that we move away from functionalism. What? And he talked about study of the patterns, the repetitive patterns of people, and the patterns that we can find in culture, and that they are the clues to good design, that in that way design can be long-lasting. I believed him. Second semester was the thesis. And I decided to enter the Ruberoid competition. It was a national competition that had gained a lot of notoriety because of the results. It was divided into a student category and a professional category. It was always on big scale planning that would improve the human environment. That's in their writings. So I entered. At some point, I was notified that my submission won both the student and the professional divisions. Wow. I think, I'm not sure, but I'm very sure about the cash prize that they sent, and it was substantial. It suggested that I might have won both, and it really paved the way to make the most of my next adventures.
University of Pennsylvania. So this was where you were in the Louis Kahn Master Studio.
Yes.
Which was an entirely different experience from going around Europe and visiting all of the art and architecture.
Penn was more than Kahn. It was a boiler house full of teachers and professionals practicing design that was world renowned. That Ian McHarg was there. I believe he was the godfather of sustainable design. And in his book, Design with Nature, it was very instructive to architects all over the world of how to work with nature and what was important. There was this upstart guy, Robert Venturi, young Turk, writing a book about complexity and contradiction in architecture. What does that mean? He was helping especially the young architects understand all the important things that should be included in design and hadn't been. Ed Bacon was in charge of city planning.
Doing his walks around the city.
He had a book, Design of Cities, and he was also the city planner of Philadelphia. Good teacher.
We were still using his books in the 70s in school.
Secret. Edmund, was on the jury of the Ruberoid competition. Maybe he helped me get into graduate school.
Yes. Saw that name and said, I remember him.
Maybe.
Yes, Abend was a rare name, right? Right.
I don't know.
I think so.
But those coincidences come together sometime. And G. Holmes Perkins was the dean. He was well known as an urban designer. He asked myself and another student to help illustrate a book that he was doing on it was an anthology of urban design. So that was a special experience too.
Somehow you've been influenced by Saarinen with his curvy shapes, form, and then you're being influenced by Louis Kahn, who has a very...
I hadn't noticed that Saarinen was into curves, but you're right.
Yeah.
So now comes Lou Kahn.
And yes, very different.
Would you believe that when I got there in '64, I really didn't know very much about Kahn? I don't know where I had been. But he was considered like a god in that school and other schools, and he was making a big impression all over the world in the importance of architecture and how to make it. He believed very strongly that architecture was important to society. That if you design a building well, if it's thoughtful, it could influence and would help people. He was resolute in that in the design of a space, that it reveal the needs of the inhabitants, not about the structure or other things. What did the inhabitants, the users, need? He was resolute in the use of materials and construction to reveal the way the building is made, the honest story of how it's made. There are a lot of stories about him and a lot of quips about what he stood for. Mm-hmm. And when I say he was about what a building wants to be, it seems so not enough to describe his importance and what he passed on to other people. Much of our training, learning, was in identification of the patterns in a building.
Steve, we have to thank you for your good time today, because you've given a lot of wise words, you've given a lot of your history, and we appreciate you inviting us here to your home and sharing your stories. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thanks.